Welcome in, one and all. I am now going to be reviewing all of week 15 action of the NFL season. I know I have a habit of always playing that Fox intro, and I've said this probably several times of all the intros of all the different networks that cover football. Fox is definitely my favorite. So I got a funny feeling with almost every video, I will most likely be playing that. CBS has their own iconic one, and yes, ESPN and all the other ones have their own individual intros, but there's just something about that Fox intro that's just like, man, that just jacks you up. It just pumps you up for football. So, like I said, I will be going over all of Week 15's action of the NFL season. I'll say who I predicted would win, who actually won, the score of the game, and where the teams stand as of now. So Thursday night magic took place in the AFC West, where we had the host team in the Las Vegas Raiders, and they're taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. I did predict the Raiders would win, but holy cow, I did not see a blowout happening. 63 to 21 was the final score. Just an absolute onslaught. And it's crazy to think that just in week 14, the Raiders were had 0 points. I think they lost 3-0 to the Vikings. So the fact that they were able to get 63 points in one game is just absolutely absurd after getting shut out the previous week. So I was 1-0 on those predictions. And obviously, with that blowout loss, the Chargers parted ways with their head coach. And I'm not too surprised about this at all because the Chargers have charged a lot of games. But yeah, this one was just brutal, to be honest with you. All right, so there were three games on Saturday, and we'll go over the Saturday games. The first one takes place in Cincinnati, where you have the Bengals, and they were playing host to the Minnesota Vikings. Who would have guessed? I just talked about that team. I did predict, I'll get the team's logos up on the screen here. Probably should have scrolled the other way, would have been a lot faster. Okay, I did predict that Minnesota would get the victory. I actually predicted quite a few away teams, but it was not meant to be. It was a close affair, 27 to 24 was the final score. I should have also mentioned that with the Raiders win, they're 6-8, and with the Chargers loss, they are 5-9. So I forgot to mention that. So 27-24 was the final score from this one. With that, the Bengals have improved to 8-6, and it's hard to believe they're playing as well as they are without Joe Burrow. They're actually still in contention for a wild card spot, and with the loss, the Vikings have now dropped to 7-7. Their wild card hopes are still. It's still they're still there. They're still in that hunt, but I don't know if they're going to be able to catch the Lions. I'll get to them in just a moment. For that NFC North crown, I feel like it might be too much to ask. They do play them two of the last three games, so it's going to be very crucial if the Vikings want to try to push to get that NFC North title back to back. But I think they're now 3 games behind the Lions, so it's going to be very tough to play catch up. But again, if you're a Vikings fan, at least you're still in the hunt for a wild card position. All right, the next matchup takes place in Indianapolis, where we have the Colts, and they were playing host to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I honestly did think that even though both teams don't have their starting quarterbacks, Pickett's out for the Steelers, obviously Richardson's out for the Colts. So it was basically backup versus backup. You had Minshew for the Colts, and you had Trubisky for the Steelers. It's like, what is this, a Jaguars and Chicago Bears game? No. They're on different teams now. But the final score in this one would be 30-13 in favor of the Colts. The Colts are very much real. There's no question about that. I know when I did my preview for this team, I thought, man, this is going to be a long season for this Colts squad. But they're right there in the thick of things, not just in the hunt for a wild card position, but they're just a game back of the Jaguars. So it's just crazy to think how far they've come and how competitive they are. And I would not be shocked if we did not see. Sorry, I would not be shocked to see the Colts make a postseason appearance. So with the win, they have improved to 8-6, and with the loss, the Steelers have dropped to 500. They're at 7-7. All right, the last game from Saturday took place in the Motor City. I just talked about this team, the Detroit Lions, and they played host to the team I cheer for in the Denver Broncos. I honestly thought after the Broncos The Week 14 performance, I thought maybe they'd be able to bring some of that momentum into Detroit, but yeah, it got squashed pretty quick. They went from having an elite defense to giving up 42 points, 6 touchdowns. It's not very good. So 42-17 would be the final score. And if anyone happened to tune into that game or just watch highlights, there was a bit of a, how do you put it? You could see on the sidelines the frustration on the Broncos side. And there was one incident where you can see Sean Payton storming over to Russell Wilson and just chewing him out. No one knows exactly what happened. Obviously, when it came to them being interviewed, they're not going to they're going to keep that kind of stuff to themselves. So no one has any idea what was going on. There's obviously some tension with his team, considering that there was high hopes for them. I'm not saying all hope is lost, but with the loss, they've dropped to 7-7. And I believe they've fallen to like 11th place in that AFC, in the AFC. And if the number 7 seed gets in the postseason, you're 4 in the standings. Wow, can I English today? Holy crap! You're 11th, they're 7th. That means you got to win your last 3 games and hope that teams that are 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th above you all go on 3-game losing streaks. So it's looking bleak. It's not all hope is lost, but they're on life support to say the least. With the Lions, a huge victory. They have now secured their 10th win of the season, and they're sitting at 10-4. And just like I mentioned with the Vikings, if the Lions happen to beat the Vikings or their Week 16 opponents, there's a very good chance they could claim their first NFC North title. And I think the last time they won out a division was back in '93, but I think that was the Central Division because obviously they've changed divisions since 30 years ago. All right, that takes care of all of Saturday's action. Now we're going to tune into the Sunday. And the first one takes place in the NFC South, where we have the host team and the Carolina Panthers, and they're taking on the Atlanta Falcons. Oh, there. So, a lot of people probably figured that the Falcons would have been able to get a victory, but they've been so wishy-washy and so inconsistent. Believe it or not, the Carolina Panthers won. Holy crap, who would have guessed that? 9-7 would be the final score in this one. With that, the Panthers are now 2-12, so they at least have more than one win on this season. That's nice. With the loss, the Falcons are now dropped to 6-8. Now, again, not all hope is lost, but with this team, like it looked like they were really good some weeks, and when they come out and lay an egg against the worst team in the NFL, their playoff hopes aren't completely lost because they're technically only a game or so back in the wild card spot, and they're only a game behind in their division. So if they can possibly win 2 of the next 3 games, and maybe the Buccaneers fall or the Saints fall, they could possibly pull out a miracle. But when you're 6-8 this late in the season, it's not looking too good. Like I said, they can win one week, look fantastic, and then they have a performance like this, and it just really makes you question this team, in my opinion. So I already went over the record. All right, no point in talking about that again. All right, so now we're off to Ohio, where we have the Cleveland Browns, who are playing very well, to say the least, and they took on the Chicago Bears, who are playing. So I did predict that Cleveland would get the victory, and they sure did. 20-17. It was a close affair to say the least. The one thing I will take away from this is the last 2 weeks, obviously the starting quarterback for the Browns is Joe Flacco. And it looks so weird because when you think of Joe Flacco, you think of him as a lifetime Raven. Because obviously he was the franchise quarterback for many years until Lamar Jackson got drafted. And obviously Lamar Jackson's now taken over that starting job. And Joe Flacco's kind of bounced around between the Broncos and the Jets. And now he's back in the AFC North. So it's odd to see players come back and play in a division, especially when they don't come back to the team that they once played for. It's more common than not, but yeah, it just still looks weird. So with the victory, the Browns have now improved to 9-5. They're very comfortable in that wild card position, and with the loss, the Bears are now 5-9. Okay. Now we're off to Lambeau, where we have the Green Bay Packers taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, I'm sure if you're a Packers fan, the last thing you hear is the name Tampa Bay because obviously a few years ago they beat them out in the NFC Championship game and went on to win the Super Bowl with Tom Brady. He's not there anymore, but man, oh man, is Baker Mayfield sure looking good. I did predict that Green Bay would get the victory, but they fell short by 2 touchdowns. 34-20 would be the final score in this one. So with that, the Buccaneers are back to 500, 7-7. I think they're tied for first in that NFC South division. And with the loss, the Packers are now 2 games below 500. Now, again, not all hope is lost, but when you're 2 games below 500 this late in the season, it's not looking that great. They're technically only a game behind a game behind in the wild card spot. So if they can possibly win out 2 of the next 3 games, and say a team above them loses 2 or 3 games, then they could possibly see themselves back in the playoff contention. But this was a big loss for this team, especially when they were playing so well the last couple of weeks. All right, off to the AFC East, where we have the Miami Dolphins, and they're playing host against the New York Jets. I'll wait till I get the team's logos on the screen before I continue. I did predict that the Dolphins would get the victory, and they sure did. 30-0 was the final score. So I've said this almost with every game that I've recapped the Dolphins. Whenever they play a team below 500, they seem like they are the best team in the league. But when they start playing teams that are very competitive or teams that have a record similar or greater than them, their true colors kind of show. So once the playoffs kick around, there's no question about if they make the playoffs, but once the playoffs come around, we'll see how this team does under pressure. So with that, they have secured their 10th win of the season. They are sitting at 10-4, and with the loss, the Jets have now officially been eliminated. They're at 5-9. All right, now we're off to New Orleans, where we have the Saints, and they are playing host to the New York Giants. So silly me, I thought, hey, the Giants have been doing pretty well. I think they won the last 2 games coming into this matchup, whereas the Saints, just like the Falcons and the Buccaneers, they've just been so wishy-washy where they look great and then they completely come off the tracks the next week. So the NFC South, those teams in that division, they're so wishy-washy. Like I said, they can look great one week and just completely look like trash the next. So, of course, I bet against the Saints, and when I do bet against them this week, it burns me. The final score on this one would be 24-6. They won by 18 points. So with the victory, the Saints, like I said, they're now in a 2-way tie for first in that division. They're sitting at 7-7. And with the loss, I got a funny feeling the Giants have now been eliminated from the postseason contention. They're sitting at 5-9. But maybe not. Unless maybe the Giants win their last 3 games, finish 8-9, and possibly squeeze into a wild card spot. There's so many different scenarios, as that NFC is pretty weak when it comes to wild card position. All right, the next matchup takes place in the AFC South, where we have the Houston Texans, and they are going up against Will Levi and the Tennessee Titans. I thought, the Titans playing somewhat better football as of late. They'd be able to come into this matchup wearing their Houston Oilers uniforms. And maybe the Texans took that personal. I don't know. But they beat the Titans. So yet again, another prediction I got wrong. The final score would be 19-16. So it was a close affair to say the least. With that, the Houston Texans have now improved to 8-6. They are still in hunt for not only a wild card position, but just like when I discussed with the Colts, they are just a game behind the Jaguars for the first place in that AFC South. And with the loss, the Titans have now officially been eliminated from this year's postseason contention. 5-9 is where they stand at the end of this one. All right, now we're off to Foxborough, where we have the host team in the New England Patriots, and they were taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. A tale of 2 tales, if that makes any sense, for both these squads. Obviously, the Patriots are coming into this matchup. They came into this matchup with probably one of the worst seasons ever. And I know I've said this 100 times, and I'll say it 100 more times, that since Brady left, the Patriots have now been in like a rebuild kind of a mode. Yeah, they have Mac Jones, but he's not playing up to the hype, I guess. I mean, I don't know if they expected this kid to be like the next Brady, but he sure hasn't reached that level. And Bill Belichick, I just seen a stat that since Brady's left, he's actually had a below 500 record. So it's just absurd to think that Brady needed Belichick when really Belichick needed Brady for all those Super Bowl wins. So I'm hoping he'll be sending him some thank you cards out. So the final score in this one, 27-17. The Chiefs got back on the win column after losing their last two games. There were no controversial calls in this one. Didn't have any offsides. So at least we were able to play a full 60 minutes and not have the drama afterwards. So with the victory, the Chiefs are now sitting at 9-5. They have a 2-game lead in that AFC West. And with the loss, the Patriots have now dropped to 3-11. Right, the next matchup takes place in the NFC West, where we have the host team in the Arizona Cardinals, and they were taking on their division lead in the San Francisco 49ers. Okay. So I did predict that the 49ers would get the victory. I should have also mentioned that I picked the Chiefs to win, and obviously they did. I did predict that the San Francisco 49ers would get the victory, and they did, 45-29, so a high-scoring affair to say the least. They won by 16 points. With the victory, San Francisco has now improved to 11-3, and with the loss, the Arizona Cardinals have dropped to 3-11. All right. The next matchup is still in the NFC West. It's just an NFC West and an NFC East team that were playing against each other. So we had the Washington Commanders, and they went into LA to take on the Rams. I did predict that Los Angeles would get the victory, and they sure did. The final score on this one will be 28-20, so just a one-score game. With the victory, the Rams are now back to 500, sitting at 7-7. They have now put themselves back into a playoff position. And with the loss, I mean, I think the Washington Commanders are already out of contention, but they have now dropped to 4-10. All right. Now we're off to the AFC East, where we have the Buffalo Bills, who have been looking red hot recently, taking on the Dallas Cowboys. I did predict that Buffalo would get the victory only because they are in desperation mode, because just imagine this team not making the playoffs. That would be very catastrophic, to say the least. So the final score on this one would be 31-10. It was an absolute beatdown from start to finish. The Bills have now improved to 8-6. They're now 2 games above 500. Still in the thick of things in that AFC wildcard position. For the Dallas Cowboys, it sucks to lose, but they're still 10-4, and they are still atop of their division. So not all hope is lost, even though you lost. All right, the Sunday night game took place in Jacksonville, where we had the Jaguars, and they played host to the Baltimore Ravens. So I will get the team's logos put up on the screen here momentarily. So I did predict that Lamar Jackson and company would come away with the victory, and they sure did. 23-7 was the final score. They won by 16 points. With the victory, the Ravens have now improved to 11-3. And with the loss, the Jaguars are sitting at 8-6. And just like I discussed with the Colts and with the Texans, it's basically like a three-way tie now for first in that division. They all have 8-6. So for the last 3 games for all those teams in the AFC South, it's going to be very crucial moving forward. All right, and the last game was a Monday night affair between the Seattle Seahawks, who played host to the Philadelphia Eagles. So I will have the team's logos on the screen right away. I did predict that the Eagles would get the victory, and man, I've been burned 3 weeks in a row now. The final score would be 20-17. Drew Lock got his first start as a member of the Seahawks, and at first, It looked like, well, this is the Drew Lock that we all kind of expected, and the reason why Denver kind of gave up on him. But he stormed back and got a comeback victory against the Eagles. 20-17 would be the final score in this one. So with that, the Seahawks are now put themselves back into a wild card position for a postseason push. And with the loss, the Eagles are 10-4, still respectable. But it's kind of hard to believe. Just like a month ago, they're looking like the team to beat in the NFL, not just the NFC, but the NFL. And now they're on the 3-game losing streak. There's never a good time to go on a 3-game losing streak, but this late in the season, this can cost you. Not only can it cost you a potential division title, but if you get dropped down to a wild card spot, yeah, you're more likely going to be playing a NFC South opponent, and maybe you could get a wild card victory. But moving forward, once you get to the divisional round, who could you possibly be facing? And if you get past them, who are you going to face in the NFC Championship game? And if it ends up being the Eagles, if the Eagles make it that far, I believe the 49ers are going to be the team out of the NFC to beat. And it's not going to be easy going against them, especially if you have to go into their yard. All right, that takes care of my Week 15 recap of the NFL season. It's hard to believe we only have 3 more weeks left of the regular season, and then the postseason is about a month away. If you like this type of content, I say attempt because I know I do miss days. I do attempt to do videos on the daily. Please feel free to hit the sub button. I'd be very grateful and very appreciative. And as always, take care.